First of all, I want to thank Najenda Madavaram, who's the host of BetterMoCo, for inviting me to conduct this interview with County Executive Marc Elrich. And Marc, thanks for agreeing to speak with me today. So we'll start off with talking about COVID. And our county has had the highest success rate of any large county in the United States. How do you account for that, especially given that a majority of the county population are minorities?
I think a number of things really contributed to this. First, I think we got a handle on it pretty early after the initial wave when the cases first were announced and they started spreading like crazy. And and even to some extent, the state had determined that the more you close things down, the more likely you were to contain the spread of the virus. We knew, like early on, for example, that this was strictly transferred person to person. It really wasn't, there was no other vector like a mosquito or a rodent spreading it around. So human beings were the source of transmission. So the more we isolated people from each other, the more we were able to control it. And that's what we set out to do. We were able over a long period of time to watch as the governor began changing and opening more stuff up, that our cases continued to stay in the low range and cases in the rest of the state started creeping upwards. So we could actually see a clear divergent path between what we were doing and what the state was doing. So we could see that locally and we could see that nationally as well. So I think residents had a level of confidence that following what we were doing would actually lead to better outcomes. And that's the other part of this, is having people who took science seriously. I mean, most county residents understand the value of science. Most county residents are willing to listen to advice from people that's science-based. And I thought that was an enormous advantage for us. It was like a good confluence of people and leadership and also our ability to pivot some of the things we did. We had, initially relied on our own Health and Human Services department to get information out and do community work. And we pretty quickly discovered that we're not as effective as we think we are. And we continued to see numbers lagging the minority community. So we pivoted and put a lot more trust and control to some extent in these hubs that sprung up around the county, and used them because we recognized that they had more authentic connections deeper in the community than the government did. And so rather than persisting and insisting that we would do everything ourselves, we kind of let go. What the county was good at is providing resources, money and things. But there's no substitution for the authenticity of voices coming out of those communities, particularly communities that aren't always trustful of government. So I'd say a number of things worked in our favor.
Right. So one thing you've been criticized for is not issuing an employee mandate. Please comment on that.
Most of our employees were vaccinated, and the departments where we lagged in vaccination were the two departments where we could least afford to lose people. It was three departments: fire, police, and corrections. And the loss of employees there, we're already talking about, for an example, in the police department, how short-staffed we are. And losing even modest numbers of people in the police department would have been really problematic for us. And our firefighters are working on a lot of holdovers now. It means that they're not able to leave when they're supposed to leave. They're still doing a lot of overtime, and it's not the kind of overtime you volunteer for necessarily. So I did not want to take a chance on those two departments. We had been doing this for a long time. If you remember, whether vaccinated or not, our force was out there. The police were out policing, the fire department was out doing fire, the jail was operating, and we were decently staffed in the jail, except as people got sick, our staff got sick. But we hadn't had outbreaks. We hadn't had, firehouses closed because people got COVID. We didn't have stations suddenly decimated because people had been in a roll call. So whatever people were doing was safe enough to keep it from spreading, and it didn't put the county at risk. And with all the risks we were dealing with, I didn't see the point of adding additional. But at the end of the day, the council could have passed it. That's the part of, that's kind of weird in all this. I didn't veto anything. I just said you need to consider the impact on services. Maybe they prefer that I pretend there would be no impact and they would get cover. Then, of course, I would get the blame when there was impact on services. But I just kept saying, you have to think about this. So they were free to think about it and make whatever decision they wanted. And at this point, I don't actually know why you'd do that, because most people are going to get vaccinated, and they've got new vaccines coming out. You're likely to have a once-a-year vaccine coming this fall. I think we've gotten pretty far down that road, and the council members can't say that it's endemic, and at the same time insist that at this point we push. I wish everybody would get vaccinated. I will say the unions worked with us. They called their members. We were very emphatic about what you should do. And I think we wound up with, at least reasonable rates of vaccination, even if they weren't as high as they would have been if they had been mandatory.
All right, let me turn to the next topic. County in 2021 had $28 billion invested in the business community, including $800 million in venture capital funds, which is more than the rest of the state combined. How did you accomplish that?
I think it was the good fortune of being a life sciences center. And we got very aggressive about both promoting life sciences, but also making sure they wouldn't run into the kind of regulatory hurdles that they were used to running into in Montgomery County. I mean, we did not have a great reputation for the ability to speed projects, for example, through the approval process. And I can't fix park and planning, but I could fix the stuff on our side of this. And there were times when I actually was talking to the leadership of a couple of biotech companies and assuring them they didn't need to go to Frederick to get a building done quickly, that we would be able to provide the same kind of service here. And we were able to do that. So there have been real changes in how our permitting department operates, and it's much more customer friendly. It's, we load up on a front meeting at the beginning of the process so that developers can ask all the questions they have. Our staff can tell them what kind of things they're going to be looking for and what concerns they have, which makes it a lot easier for them to present the project that's likely to be approved. And if they don't get initially approved, our folks work with them to fix it. I mean, kind of in the old days, it would be like, if you failed, it's like, call us when you're ready to try again. And that would just upset people. And we would inspect people until we found something that failed, and then they'd stop the inspection, and then they'd come back and pick up where they left off. And then when they found something else, they'd stop the inspection. And we basically said, you need to stop that. We need to give people a punch list of everything. They need to have the opportunity to fix everything. So we really made changes in how we handled the developments coming in. And so I think that, and the bioscience climate here, and the fact the feds invested, we got a large portion of that money that was targeted on vaccines. I think the county got more than the rest of the country. So we were in a really good position to take off, and we wanted to be sure that we were able to take off, and that our work just didn't extend to the vaccine companies, but to anybody out there who is doing this cutting edge scientific research. So we were very aggressive about making sure we grew that sector. It is, when you think about Montgomery County, there is no industrial sector in Montgomery County. And for years, our sector was federal government employees. We used to brag about how this county was recession proof because we had so many employees in the federal government, and there hadn't been a lot of attention to private sector stuff. And we've kind of reversed this and put a lot more attention on what it takes to bring a company here. I've approved as many or more, incentive packages for life sciences companies as anybody's ever done. When somebody says I say no to stuff, they obviously don't know my record, and they haven't paid any attention to the funds they voted for on the council, because they also have to approve all these packages. We've been very aggressive about making sure we get the jobs and the science growth that we need here. And I can talk about other stuff later.
What are your future plans as far as the business investment?
So, but there are a couple of things. First of all, we know, because the business community has been very clear about this, that transportation is the number one impediment to the economic growth. And in Montgomery County's transportation system, we've got Metro. Metro's got problems, but also Metro doesn't connect a lot within the county. This isn't a system where the train stops every 10 blocks and when you get off, you've got a 5-block radius around you where you can go to, all kinds of businesses. Our stations are much farther apart than, say, the New York subway. And it basically ferries people from the suburbs into the district, which, when you think about it, is what it was designed for when Metro was built. And this is, when I was growing up, some people referred to it as the white flight line, because basically it took white workers who moved out of the district at the end of the 50s and into the 60s, and they moved to the suburbs, and the Metro ferried those workers back into the federal jobs. And you could argue that that was also kind of a socially unwise policy in terms of the district, but it's, that's how that Metro was designed. But it also meant it wasn't meant to really serve growth and development of Montgomery County, which is why I pushed on a BRT network that would have 100 lane miles. It would be cross-connected, not just a couple of lines north-south. So you could basically get anywhere from any place in the county. So it was meant to feed jobs. And we were never able to fund it because the county never had the tax revenue to fund it. We flat out collect less money for transportation than Virginia does from the developers. And we can show you a study by Jones Lang LaSalle that makes the point that Montgomery County is basically the cheapest state in the region when it comes to development taxes. And what that's meant is, while Virginia builds the Silver Line and all the counties there are building bus rapid transit, and I mean real bus rapid transit, not like, a lane and mixed use on 29 so far. When they built real projects, they did it because they had a tax base that came off of commercial property that allowed them to do that. Montgomery County's never been willing to do that. The mantra has always been, well, if we spend any of our own money, the state will never give us any money. So how many years are we into this with the state never giving us any money? And we need to do what Virginia did, which is get the state legislature to give them taxing authority in a better way than we tax. So, I want to deal with the transportation. I want to deal with the tax issue. Like I said, we are cheaper than Virginia by far. The quickest example, Tyson's Corner is over $1.65 on commercial property. Downtown DC is $1.85 on commercial property. Montgomery County is like 99 cents plus the state tax. Virginia, they get 0.7 of 1 penny on their sales tax. That goes to transportation. And the counties there, like Fairfax, have a 12.5 cents on commercial property, only on commercial property, but all commercial property. And that 12.5 cent tax builds transportation. Montgomery County has nothing like that. So we lag regionally, not because we're a bad location or because of our tax policies. We have better tax policies if you only measure them by the dollar, but we don't produce value to developers for the dollars that they pay. And so we lose. Virginia builds stuff, we don't. And I'm intent on rectifying that. And that, I think we can get that done with another council that's not so political. And we'll actually have 4 years to cool their heels and to think about how do we get Montgomery County moving. Because I put a lot of thought into this, and I'm perfectly willing to change what we do and mimic some of the things Virginia does, because it actually works better. And I've adopted I tell people that if somebody's eating your lunch, you ought to look at how they got your lunch. And that's something Montgomery County's never done. And we looked at it and we understand real clearly what our advantages are and what our disadvantages are. And the irony is that changing the tax system would leave Montgomery County with as much or more money, but it would allow us to float bonds, which we can't do with our current tax structure. So we would be able to get a lot farther, a lot faster. And the other thing is, focuses around White Flint, WMATA, and life sciences. When we didn't get Amazon, which is not the end of the universe, I looked at that and, you wonder why you didn't get it. Because we found out we had outbid Virginia for Amazon. We put more money on the table for Amazon than probably anybody else did. We're certainly in the top one or two, but we put more money on the table than Virginia did. But what Virginia understood that the state didn't understand here is that Amazon wanted talent. And what they offered Amazon was getting George Mason and University of Virginia close to the Amazon campus, where they would provide a steady stream of talent out of their programs there that would fuel Amazon's growth. And that excited Amazon. So also they were able to move into a built part of the city there. You know, we were offering them a lot of dirt where the Lerner property is, you know, Lord and Taylor, and 45 acres of dirt, and a lot of low-rise development, not much of an urban area. And Virginia was also able to offer them an urban area where there would be amenities and restaurants and all those things. So we weren't competitive on that. So I had started a conversation with WMATA over 2 years ago, and the focus was to get them to take their kind of flagship property in White Flint and solicit a master developer to develop it as a life sciences hub. And I began talking with the private sector about what I wanted to do. So on the private sector side, every developer right now on the west side of the Pike in White Flint has life sciences projects staged to go forward. I think they took me seriously that we would actually do something here. And WMATA hired Jones Lang LaSalle to do an analysis for them. I get why it is to say, yeah, Mark, that's a great idea. We're sure you're right. We'll change the way we attract investment. So they asked Jones Lang LaSalle, what the highest and best use of their property was. And they came back and said, the highest and best use of your property is life sciences. And so it made WMATA comfortable with going in that direction. So we expect to see a joint solicitation for a master developer to develop their property focused on life sciences. And that puts it right on top of the metro. And this is really critical because when you think about life sciences around the country, San Francisco is hot and it's an urban area. San Diego is hot and it's an urban area. In Boston, Kendall Square is an urban area and it's one of the hottest properties in the United States. And our life sciences are primarily in office parks in Shady Grove, and they serve a purpose. But we've got an opportunity to build the center, and that's what we're hoping to achieve in White Flint, is to bring a confluence of companies close to each other in what will also be built out as an urban setting with all the attractions of urbanity. So the company won't just look at the square footage, but that they'll look at the value of the whole proposition. Where will my employees eat lunch? Can they go to dinner? Can they hang around and shop? Do they have to drive out because this is a dead zone once we close? All those things we think we can address inside a new plan. I'm sure the developers around there are going to follow that plan because life sciences is valuable to all of them. It's going to be a major growth industry in the county. And to kind of build on that, I also started going to the University of Maryland, and I pitched them on investing in life sciences in Montgomery County. And, Montgomery County has never really had a true university presence here. They participate at universities of Shady Grove. University of Shady Grove isn't a graduate level research university. And we're the only life sciences area that's not focused by a life sciences grad program at a university. Everybody else, all the other folks have it. And we're number 4 in the country. And so we've risen in an enormous way without having what some people would consider a key component. And so I started asking the university to play a role here. And I made the point that, in Virginia, they use their university system as an economic driver. They are very conscious. When Amazon said, we want talent, they just jumped to it. And they put, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into things that would provide Amazon the talent they needed. And we've never done that. We've never used the university that way. And the university hasn't seen itself that way. So after a lot of conversations, we actually signed the joint MOU with all the, the university presidents. Dr. Perman is the chancellor of the whole system, to bring graduate level research here. And not too long after that, I had a meeting with NIST and with the new director of NIST. We were talking about, where Montgomery County could go with an aid or a boost to our life sciences research. I asked her about quantum and AI, and her answer was quantum not ready for prime time yet, but AI is out there and people are using it. And then we got approached by the dean of the school at Maryland that does the artificial intelligence, and he was like, "We would like to be there." And so we started conversations with the university, and where we left it at the end of the legislative session is they want to put a facility in Montgomery County that focuses on artificial intelligence, big data, focuses on aiding the life sciences. Basically, you're trying to train a new generation of scientists and how to use big data and artificial intelligence. They would also serve the hospitality industry, because they had been approached at Maryland by Marriott and the other big one that we have, to Choice, to help them with AI, because they like AI for being able to envision environments before they build the environments. So those are two big things that we think will become centers of. And the other piece is growing other artificial intelligence companies, because big data has implications for everything we do and how we process all the information. And it's going to give a jump to technology, and not just life sciences, but technology in general, because people can speed up their research. They can find out more about things than they would ever find, like I do. Like, I'm up at night at 2:00 Googling stuff. So it's like imagining that you had all the computing power that you could possibly assemble, Googling and sorting. We could never match that as human beings. These machines can do it, and they can do it a lot faster. So I see us, kind of helping to drive three industries here. But I think at the end of the day, the big thing is, Montgomery County has always been considered kind of sleepy and not aggressive about business attraction. I think that making a bold statement on where we're going with life sciences in this county and what we want to do, and to get an artificial intelligence hub in this county, will send the signal that this county is actually serious about it. And that's my goal, is, I can deal with my regulatory processes, I can fix the tax processes, but the big thing left to fix is the impression that we're serious about doing something. When people start seeing the buildings going up and the solicitations going out, they're going to get a different view of us.